Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are reviewing The Warren Buffett Way by Robert G. Hamstrung. Okay, and by the way, I'm terrible with last names, but overall, I'll tell you what I'm not terrible with, which is basically my idea of this book. This book is actually pretty good, it's pretty amazing, and at its core, it's a simple breakdown of how Warren Buffett goes about analyzing a business and how he thinks about an investment. And there's actually calculations here about how to calculate intrinsic value. But this book is not a book filled with numbers. It's a book kind of like, for example, The Intelligent Investor, where a lot of it is just mindset and the way Warren Buffett actually thinks. And I used to get so frustrated with that when I first started learning about investment, because in reality, I wanted numbers. I wanted more examples and, oh my gosh, give me more. But in reality, and by the way, I recommend this book. I give it a 9.5 out of 10 because I did want more examples and numbers, but that's just the way I am. But overall, the only reason I'm doing this book review is because basically I like it. If the book sucked, I wouldn't make a book review because I wouldn't be bothered by even reading the rest of it. But overall, I used to get so frustrated with that, but in reality, the math that goes behind analyzing a business is fairly simple. You're doing discounted cash flows. You're calculating what those future cash flows are basically worth today and its present value. And once you kind of understand that, it's simple. But to understand the actual business, the whole process, the mindset, that's the more complexity thing when it comes to understanding investing. But the mathematics is fairly simple. And if it was just, for example, mathematics, the richest people out there will be mathematicians, but they're obviously not. So obviously, it's just not math and accounting. It's a lot of other things that go into investing, and that's what this book presents. And by the way, you have names in here, for example, like Don C. Bogle gave this book praises. Also, for example, Peter Lynch, also Philip Fisher, also Kenneth L. Fisher. I'm not sure exactly who Bill Miller is. I should know who he is, I think, but I'm not sure who he is, but he's also a pretty good investor. And over time, guys, what I've learned to do with these book reviews, basically, I just go through the table of contents and I tell you exactly what I thought about this book. And in reality, there are about 12 chapters. There's also an afterword, which I never really saw in a book before. So after the book is over, the author has, for example, some final comments, and I'm like, okay, so why not just make that a chapter? But it's an afterword. I never heard that before, like an afterword. I just never heard about it, okay? I heard about forward, but never about afterword. Now, as always, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified because I have more videos coming out on investing and so on, and you don't want to miss out on that. And although I'm reading, guys, I'm practicing too. So when I do have stock tips, I'll tell you about my analysis. I probably won't tell you, honestly, because it's a lot of work and I'm not willing to give it up. But what I will do is tell you the process of analyzing businesses, and whenever I'm done with a company, I'll share my thoughts and how I actually came up with the idea. But it doesn't look good for a YouTuber to talk about a company and I have a lot of subscribers. You guys go out there, you buy it, we pump the price up, and if it reaches what it's worth, then I'm like, I'm not gonna hold this company anymore. I'm probably gonna dump it, right? So it's probably not the best idea. Okay, that's why I say that. It's not just because greed and so on, although that is a part of it too. But overall, guys, the first chapter of this book is The World's Greatest Investor. It basically talks about Warren Buffett in here, and I don't really recall that much of it whatsoever in the introduction. Then you have the education of Warren Buffett, which again, don't really recall that much about it either. But then you have, for example, the third chapter is Our Main Business is Insurance, the Early Days of Berkshire Hathaway. Now this I do remember because in here he dives into exactly the value of an insurance company, and it comes down to float. And float is a difference, for example, when you pay those premiums, that money that stays in the hands of the insurance company until they actually have to give you the premiums back to actually do the claims, well, that money is super valuable because that's money you can basically use to invest. And that's what Warren Buffett does. He knows how to allocate more than anybody else. Now, number 4 is buying a business. It's about thinking, for example, less about a share and actually owning a business. And that thought is so powerful because people say that, right? Like, oh, you're supposed to analyze the business, not just see it as a share. But the most powerful thing in reality is to think about it from a perspective of, I'm about to own this business. So if I'm going to own this business, what are the things that I actually care about? And when you get into that mindset, that's the most important thing. Is this business good? Is it going to give me beyond average profits? Am I going to see, for example, owners' cash flows, basically meaning, hey, after I'm done with the entire business, is there money left over for me? Like, all these factors are so important. And then you have, for example, number 5, investing guidelines, business tenants. The business tenants, I think there are 4 in total. They talk about management, owning the business, and so on. And it's basically the 10 tenants that Warren Buffett uses when he's actually looking at a business. Now, are these confirmed? The answer is no, but it's just obvious because the more you study Warren Buffett, you kind of just see this pattern in his investment style, and it kind of develops over time. So he talks about here the 10 business tenets that you actually see in Warren Buffett. And you have, for example, the management tenets, you have, for example, the financial tenets, the value tenets, and also, for example, the business tenets. And overall, it comes down to investing into a good business with good economics, underlying economics, not, for example, economics outside of the business. It comes down to good management that's basically doing everything to allocate capital the best way for its shareholders and is actually candid with its shareholders, meaning that, hey, they share the information to us without trying to hide it. Also, financial tenets, what to look at when you're looking at a company, exactly. And also the value tenets, how do you value a company? And yes, he does have in here valuation techniques, which is basically just discounted cash flows. And again, it's not that cool, but it is simple because it is simple. Number 9, you have, for example, investing into fixed income securities, because whenever we think about Warren Buffett, we usually only think about, for example, stocks and businesses. But in reality, Warren Buffett, if you ever read Security Analyst, the first hundreds of pages are just based on fixed income securities, because at the end of the day, when you get into equities, which is basically a little bit more risk, then in reality, fixed income securities are a lot more easy to understand, and they do create opportunities to actually invest into. And by the way, by that I mean bonds, whether it's corporate bonds, treasury bonds, and so on, that actually create opportunities. Now, and by the way, he shows examples of several times Warren Buffett basically made a killing when it came to bonds and so on, because the entire bond market was basically depreciated. And what it usually is basically that Warren Buffett is just not looking at, for example, only stocks or only owning full businesses, but he's looking at the entire investment environment and just looking for bargains. A value investor is looking for bargains and is looking to have the highest probability of success and makes big bets when he finds opportunities. Number 10, managing your portfolio. This is where you come into, for example, to a concentrated portfolio, and it's all about value investing. And it comes down to diversification is for the know-nothing investor. And for that investor, if you don't know anything, you're better off just investing, for example, into an index fund. But if you are a know-something investor, which basically means you know something, you've done your research and you've done your homework, in reality, you're better off just having, for example, a few companies. And this idea comes from Philip Fisher, because in reality, Philip Fisher talks about, for example, I'd rather have, for example, 10, 15 companies that I actually know fully well and I can actually concentrate on than have, for example, a bunch of mediocre businesses just to give me diversification. The idea is as simple as saying, I'd rather have a basket with a few good eggs and watch them carefully than a basket of a bunch of eggs and not know what the heck is going on. Some are spoiled or some are not spoiled. That's the idea. Number 11, which is basically the psychology of money, talks about the two most important factors in investing, which is basically fear and greed, and also talks about the psychology of how we look at risk. What is it called? Risk aversion, or is it like, for example, risk management? I know there's loss aversion, and also, for example, risk management, and also how Warren Buffett approaches his investment techniques when everybody's fearful, right? And the whole concept is fairly simple. Psychology of money basically says, for example, and this is where Benjamin Graham comes in, you have to have your faith not in your ideas per se, but more in the facts and the data. And you have to make investments where you're fairly confident in them. And there's a difference between being confident in the information and overconfidence, because that can create a bias where you just, like, my biggest fault has always been if I take a test and I'm so overconfident, I basically just read the question, answer it right away because I think I know the answer. But sometimes that leads me to make very silly mistakes, and you want to avoid that. You want to approach every investment with a fresh mind and to actually analyze it fully. And Charlie Munger talks about this. By the way, a great book to analyze the psychology of an investor is going to be, for example, that book back there, which is basically Poor Charlie's Almanac. It's a great book, Psychology of Investing, and a whole bunch of biases we have as investors overall and just humans overall. Now, number 12 is The Unreasonable Man. And that's basically the last chapter of this book. And it comes down to, for example, the reasonable man shapes himself for the world, and the unreasonable man tries to change the world to fit into him, okay? And that's what Warren Buffett is, right? Because he goes against the stride, and he says, hey, this is the way to invest. I don't care what the rest of the people are doing. And that's the core idea. And the last part of the book is the afterword. Now, this right here is my favorite part of the book, which is the afterword. And my favorite quote of this book, I'm not sure if I read it here or somewhere else. I just don't know. I have so many books in my head, but I think I read it in this book. And it comes down to, when you think about Warren Buffett, think about him as a teacher. Do not think about yourself as his disciple. And that is so powerful, because when you have, for example, a hero, which, by the way, Warren Buffett to me is like my hero, right? I appreciate this guy so much in life, in money, in business, in all parts, because he's helped me so much. But overall, the concept is, when it comes to a teacher, you learn what you need, you leave what you don't need, and you apply the principles. But whenever you're a disciple, you're basically just defending somebody's beliefs no matter what, and that's not what you want to be in this case. Jesus, that's different. Warren Buffett, just a man, different concept, okay? And it makes a lot of sense, because towards the end of the book, which is the afterword, the author says, when I studied Warren Buffett, I read The Intelligent Investor, I read his annual reports, I think it was from 1984, something like that. I read the annual report, and I basically got all the magazines, all the interviews, I watched them. I studied for like 10 years, Warren Buffett, and I basically used his plan for like 7 years. And he said I was getting below average performances, because basically I was becoming a copy or a mirror of Warren Buffett. And in that sense, it makes sense why you would get below average performance, because in reality, you were investing into companies Warren did before, but when he bought them, he was buying them based on, for example, future growth, while you were buying them once the growth actually slowed down, and you probably had, for example, lower intrinsic value margin of safety. And the idea is very simple here. Once the author realized this, he realized that he can basically take these concepts that Warren Buffett has, and these ideas and these fundamentals or principles, and apply them to the entire universe of investments. So if Warren Buffett says, hey, analyzing technology companies is very hard for me, it doesn't mean it's impossible for you. The core idea is, when you are a student, you learn and you apply. The same, it's so amazing, because I just had the thought right now, but when you think about it, when Warren Buffett first learned from Benjamin Graham, which is basically just find businesses selling for less than they're worth, nets, doesn't matter, bad, good business, doesn't matter, just buy. And then he learned about Philip Fisher. And then he learned from Charlie Munger. His investment style changed, and it changed, and it changed. And today it varies, right? But the concept is still, for example, margin of safety, buy below what it's worth, buy good businesses, good management, understand the company. These are fundamentals. These are principles. But overall, he didn't stick with what he learned originally from his master back then, which is basically Benjamin Graham. He kept Benjamin Graham. Sometimes I'm like, Benjamin Franklin, for some reason in my head, it just confuses myself. But the point is, he kept evolving and learning, the same thing that we have to do. So we have to keep learning and evolving. And one of my favorite quotes ever, and by the way, he used this to analyze, for example, technology companies. That's what the guy did, and he made some money doing that. But overall, one of my favorite quotes I heard today was from Charlie Munger, and he says, we started out with basically nothing, and we got something. So if the next generation starts with something, they should get a lot more than we did. And basically talking about, for example, his family. But I apply that to investing, because when Warren Buffett started, he started with very little. Just like a little bit of the Benjamin Graham techniques and so on, and Philip Fisher. But that was like when the whole thing was being born. But now we have so much information. And basically means we have to do a lot better than he does, even though right now it's more competitive. Because in reality, the way Warren Buffett invests is very rare. And most people will not do it because it's very boring, it takes a long time, and it's not fast enough, okay? But for us, the value investors, we have a fiduciary duty to ourselves to do better than he did, because we're starting out from a better base than he did. So that's my review on this book. I hope you like it. Go read it. Go get it. As you read this book, make sure you practice, you keep learning. And by the way, don't be afraid to read textbooks on from, for example, from Harvard Business School. Like, they're mostly terrible, but a lot they're very good teachers when it comes to understanding, for example, discount values and so on. But just understand that a lot of the modern portfolio theory, diversification, beta, alpha, WAC, weighted average cost of capital, all this stuff is phony for the most part. But it's important to understand, like Charlie Munger also says, for example, you have to know the other person's argument better than they do, Because if you don't, then you're just basically denying something without giving it, for example, a proper chance. So that's very important. Guys, overall, that's it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified. Comment down below any questions. If you made it all the way to this part of the video, comment down below book, so I know you made it all the way to the end. I love book reviews because in reality, it helps you out a lot. But don't take a book review / summary and say, wow, you just got the whole book for like in 17 minutes. Tommy, thank you. No, it doesn't work like that. I wish it did, trust me. But you need to read it yourself, okay? You have to. You have to. I'm sorry. As always, though, see you guys later. Up here, another video. Over here is my face. Please subscribe. And as always, long-term team out. You got this.